Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hi, I'm Rory and welcome to episode 293 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Our special guest today is Kassim Harunani, who is the principal at Halley's & Company Chartered Accountants. He's a fellow chartered accountant and a certified accountant, and he's associate chartered accountant. Kassim takes care of counselling tutors' tax affairs and has joined us today to answer frequently asked questions on tax issues asked by members of our Facebook group. So if you're confused or unsure about tax requirements, you may find this interview helpful. So with that said, let's get on with today's episode.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
A massive welcome for both Rory and I. As Rory has mentioned, it's episode 293. You're at the right place. You're at the Counselling Tutor Podcast. 3 stops on today's journey, starting off with ethical sustainable practice, where we delve into the world of employment assistant programs. The pros, the cons, how to get a little bit more work or be picked within those programs as well. So we're going to be doing that deep dive under ethical sustainable practice. We then move on to Practice Matters. That's the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And today, Rory is going to be speaking to Kassim. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an inside glimpse here. Kassim is the Counselling Tutor Accountant. He's going to be speaking about why we would hire an accountant as a counsellor, as a psychotherapist. When is the right time? Is there any benefits in us doing that? And then we end today's episode, as always, with our student services, where we recognise you are student and your journey. And today we're going to be speaking about how we might handle and receive and process negative feedback during our student journey, including assignment referrals, but they're all different kinds of negative feedback that we may come across, in fact, that we will come across during our counselling journey. We're going to be delving into that world to see how we can use that maybe to grow. But starting off with that ethical sustainable practice, Rory, EAPs. So we're using the acronyms here, and of course that is Employment Assistant Program. Well, first of all, Rory, what is an EAP?
That's a very good question. Well, as you quite rightly said at the beginning, EAP is Employment Assistance Programs. And if you work for an organisation, they will have a human resources department. And the human resources department, if they identify someone who may be struggling at work, maybe a bereavement, maybe struggling with health issues, they usually partner, the HR department usually partner with what's called an EAP, an Employment Assistance Program. And it allows the HR department to say to, the person that's working for the company, look, we can see you struggling. We can see you having a bad time of it. Let's put you in touch with our Employment Assistance Program and let's see if they can offer any particular support. And that support in EAPs can be quite wide. It could be things like physiotherapy. It could be things like helping people maybe if they're in substance misuse. It can even be things like helping people get access to certain benefits. Some people may separate from their partners and find themselves in financial difficulties, and an EAP may be able to help with getting, benefits and assistance for them. They also do counselling. So EAPs have an arm of their business, which is counselling. And if someone's struggling at work, they can be referred to an EAP, and the EAP can offer a fixed block of counselling sessions to help someone through quite a difficult time. And that usually is accessed at a time and place that's convenient for the person who works for the company. We'll call them the employee. And also, it's free. So there's no cost there. So they can just access it when they want. And that, really, in a nutshell, is what an EAP is or does.
Yes. Nice. Thank you, Rory. I think that's a lovely explanation. When Rory says it's free at the point of service. So it's free for the employee who accesses the EAP. So for instance, if they are struggling with their mental health, they get offered a counsellor. The employee within the company doesn't pay for that. However, the way that the company pays for that is they will have a retainer with an EAP provider who will provide those services. So in effect, I guess it is being paid for, but it's being paid for by the company. And this brings up some pros and cons. Now, I think that EAP is a great program. It really is, because it does give access to help for those that need it. And it's about having a look at what the benefits are of that, and what the pros are and what the cons are of that. And one of the realities of working through an EAP. So as a therapist, you're working through an EAP. The individual that is accessing your service through that EAP, it may come with limits that you wouldn't have in your normal everyday practice. It's almost like working through an agency, working through an employment assistance program. They are like an agency. They will refer you the work and you will see the clients. However, you may be limited in how many sessions you are able to offer that client. There may be limitations of how your notes are kept and who sees the progress in the notes. Sometimes an EAP will ask to see some form of process from the client. The client came in and they were feeling like this. Has there been any shift in that? So it sometimes means that we're sharing some of the information of that client's journey that we wouldn't ordinarily share in perhaps a private practice. So let's just go through some pros, some cons, and then we're also going to discuss how you can maybe make yourself more appealing to an EAP provider if you choose to go down that road. And I'm going to start off with the pros. Let's start on the sunny side of the street, Rory. And we're going to start off because with one, we speak about this in ethical, sustainable practice. And the three words there, one is ethical, and we often speak about the ethical side of counselling. The next one is sustainable. Sustainable means that you, as a counsellor, psychotherapist, that you can make a living from what you offer, from the services that you deliver. And of course, working with an EAP can be a stream of regular income that comes directly from them. So it adds to your sustainability, Rory. And of course, there are another one of the pros is that you may have an interesting variety of different presentations. And I guess the other side of the street of that is if you work in an agency and it's a specific agency, maybe it's an agency that works with children and young people, then you will be seeing children and young people. If it's with bereavement, you'll have a lot of presentation around bereavement. With an EAP, you are likely to get a wider range of presentations that you can work with, which for some counsellors is I guess a pro, because you're kind of honing skills in those areas, and it might open doors for CPD. Rory, are you going to go on to some pros for us there?
Yes, and I just before I move on to the other positive aspects of working for an EAP, the stream of regular income I think is an interesting one, because as we know, our profession, if you work in private practice, has its ebbs and its flows. Some weeks the telephone will ring off the hook. Other weeks, the telephone will remain worryingly silent, or the email inbox will remain worryingly silent. And doing EAP work means that you've got a stream of regular income coming in, something that maybe you can rely on once you've signed up. In my experience, I've worked for an EAP, And if they offer 10 sessions, usually the client turns up for 10 sessions and you'd be paid for 10 sessions. So there is some kind of benefit in that if you're trying to stabilize your income. The other thing is that in some cases, an EAP client can become a private client. So it may be you get to the end of the 10 sessions and the client says, look, if I pay you privately, can I come? Can I still see you? Now you'd have to check with your EAP. Some EAPs may have rules around this, but I've known quite a few therapists who've then taken on their clients from an EAP and kept them as private clients. And also, with the world of online counselling, since the long distance pandemic, we now be hopefully beginning to forget. Hopefully, you can work from home. You work by telephone or you can work online. I've got some supervisees who work for EAPs, and they like the idea of being able to work from home. And also it can fit in with things like school holidays if you've got children and you want the school holidays off with the children. So there's quite a lot of flexibility there, Ken.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting because you're speaking about those pros, and there's the other side of the coin, of course. And I don't want to just dive deep into cons. We'll do some more pros. But the flip side of the possibility of the client becoming a private client is based in the fact that it is a limited number of sessions that will generally be offered through an EAP. And that could be 6 sessions. It could be 10 sessions, as you mentioned in your example there, Rory. And it could very well be that person presenting for therapy with you, that you quickly realize that this is long-term work with this client, and it's about what you do within that situation. And as you've said, Rory, there is maybe perhaps, and you'd need to check with the EAP provider, the possibility of then maybe retaining that client afterwards to do private work with them. But that has a number of factors, including affordability for that client themselves. So it's really worth having a think about what those limits may be, and whether you feel comfortable in taking clients on after, if there are not enough sessions to work with there. The working from home is a definite win, and I've worked with EAP referrers in the past, and they were all in person in the room. And I have to say, this was some years before the big move to digital that happened in 2000, and was it 2020? I can't remember. Like you say, Rory, it's a faded memory now. Yeah, the history. But there is more of a moving to online working, and I guess it's worth checking. Do you hold a certificate in online working? Do you hold the competence? If you look to your ethical framework, seeing as though this is ethical, sustainable practice, I'll cover both sides, Rory, the sustainability of that work coming in, but the ethics. Our ethical frameworks will call for us to do specialist training, to work online or by telephone. There are considerations that we need to take into consideration that don't maybe apply in face-to-face. So I think, I mentioned what would make you more appealing to an EAP, and perhaps having a formal qualification in online and telephone work, having a certificate and having that in your bio with the EAP provider might be an asset to you. You gain that wide range of experience because we've spoken about that variety of presentations, and in some instances there can be internal supervision that is offered by the EAP. They tend to be kind of self-serving agencies, not all of them, and there are specialist EAP providers as well. Let's just go into some of the cons. Now, you mentioned this stream of income, Rory, which, yes, of course, I'm putting a big green tick next to sustainability there. However, it's worth having a check at what rate you will be paid. You're going to have perhaps your rate that you might charge within your private practice. Is it a cut rate if you're working through an EAP? And if so, does the volume of work that they refer through to you balance that off? So that's just a consideration. So it's always worth checking what the rates are before you sign up. They may, in their advertising material to gain therapists onto their programs, say we can refer X amount of people to you each month. Well, for how much? Look at your sustainability. Does that work out for you? And the other thing, Rory, as we kind of look at Scope Ed at the moment, which is in full swing of what is expected for us to work in certain sectors and with certain kinds of presentation, we're kind of been dictated what that may look like and what our qualifications look like. And of course, EAPs, they generally sign up to these requirements. So some EAPs may require you to at least be working towards accreditation, and that may well change as Scope Ed kind of cements itself in. It's worth keeping an eye on what the requirements are and whether you meet those requirements and whether it's a fit for you, whether you believe that that is a fit for you and your practice. And then lastly, from my side, Rory, before I hand over to you, we spoke about that payment. You may be used to, within your own practice, of maybe getting the payment prior to your appointment, or maybe directly after your appointment, or maybe your clients pay at the end of the month. That'll be up to you and how you run your practice. But of course, if you're working for an EAP, chances are they are going to have payment terms, how they pay. And sometimes it can be 90 days from invoice. So you would invoice and say, I've seen this client for this many sessions, and you can wait up to 90 days to be paid. But now they do vary, but it's just worth keeping that in mind from a cash flow situation. You can have a full diary, see many clients from an EAP, and at the end of the month, look in your bank account and not see any money because it's in an invoice that is going to be paid sometime in the future. So it's worth having a think about that on the con side. Rory, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And I think that the other thing is, if you're working for an external organization, you really need to get your ducks in a row. So you really do need to generate those invoices. You need some form of bookkeeping. You don't have to employ a bookkeeper, but you need to know how many hours you've billed, and you need to check your bank account to see how many hours you've been paid for. Because occasionally, and certainly I worked for EAPs, but I've also worked as a support worker for agencies. Sometimes they forget to bill your hours. You know, you get paid and you think that's a little bit short, and then you realise that they've not paid one of your invoices or one of your timesheets. So you need to get a rhythm going and make sure that you invoice and make sure you know what you're being paid for. And I'd like to pick up a little bit on this Scope Ed. If you're listening to this thinking, well, what does Ken mean by Scope Ed? So here in the UK, well, more precisely here in England, Scotland is a slightly different case, which we don't have time to go into. But certainly in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, the ethical bodies that represent counsellors in those regions have signed up to something called Scope Ed, and that's short for Scope of Education. That's what it really means. And it effectively means that therapists have been put in 3 columns, A, B, and C. And to get into column B, you have to be accredited. And you do that by submitting a piece of work to your professional body. And once they've seen that work, rather like write an essay proving that you're practicing ethically and competently, then you can become accredited. And a lot of organisations now are looking for that accreditation tick mark. Although I have to say, I've worked for at least one EAP that didn't really ask, and I don't think they ask now. So that's always worth thinking about. However, you can be working towards accreditation, because part of accreditation is accruing a number of hours, 450 hours of face-to-face or practice hours with clients. And you can be working towards that. So it's accreditation or working towards it. Always check. I also think that you could be called on at short notice. So what I've noticed is that when I work for an EAP, I get an email or a phone call, can you see someone this week? So it means your diary has to be pretty flexible, and you might have to fit people in. So you might not hear anything for a little while, and all of a sudden you get an email or a phone call. I've got someone, we need to get them in now, because I guess from the EAP's point of view, that they're working with the ebb and flow of people being sent to them from employers. So they might have some weeks where they don't have anybody sent, and then they get a flurry of people coming through. And bearing in mind that the EAP's job is to help people get back to employment. That's the whole point of an organisation employing or hiring an EAP. It's so that if there's someone who's working, is struggling at work, they could go get the help they need and come back and be effective at work. So there is a little bit of urgency there. Also, I was surprised, I have to say, when I signed up for an EAP, because they wanted me to send client notes. And what I had to do was had a very long conversation with them about who saw the client notes, who had access to the client notes, why they had to be sent in the first place. And once I'd satisfied myself that actually the employer wouldn't see the notes were just for internal purposes. In other words, they were employing me, and as the EAP were employing me, and as my employer, like if you work for, say, the NHS, you had to put in the notes on their system. So you might have to do that, and you also might have to work with their contracts because you're effectively working for someone. So they usually send you a template contract that you have to work to. So you may want to look over that contract and see if it fits really for, your ethics or the way you work. So really, when you work for an EAP, I think, Ken, I'm sure you're employed effectively. You may be a contractor, but you're employed and have to work under their rules.
Yeah, very much so. And very important point that you raised there in your contract, having a look at the suggested contract. And if a contract is not provided for you, working around your very own contract to incorporate what the requirements of the EAP are. As you mentioned, Rory, maybe handing notes over and making sure that the client is 100% sure of that. I guess one of the cons, the last con that I'm going to cover on this, is you may not be able to follow the flow that you have within your practice. Now, what I mean by that, within my private practice, when I was practicing, I would have an introductory session. It was a 20-minute session, and it was for a prospective client to come along, have a chat, and see if they were a fit for me, and for my side to see if they felt that I was a fit for them is what I'm trying to say there. And from my side to make sure that what they were presenting with sat within my competence range, so that I would not have to refer further on into our sessions together and disrupt that process. As you've said, Rory, an EAP, you may get an email saying, hey, I've got a client for you. Can you see them this week? And when you're seeing them, that first session, very often, in my experience, at least when I was working with EAPs, was that was a paid-for session. So it broke the flow that I would normally have in my own private practice. So that's worth thinking about and checking, I guess, the competence of the referral. Does that person sit within your competence range? And if it doesn't, communicating that back to the EAP so they understand who you work with, how you work, and it's not just send anybody your way. So those are some thoughts for you. So the pros, it can be a stream of regular income, variety of presentations. The EAP clients may, under certain circumstances, be able to stay on with you and go private, that you get the opportunity to perhaps work from home or from an office, and at times that suit you. Maybe you could take the school holidays off so you can kind of plan the times you choose to work. You get a wider range of experience from those varied presentations, and sometimes they will have an internal supervisor. You can view that as a positive or a negative, depending on where you stand with that one. And the cons, check the rate of pay before you sign up. Make sure that you meet their criteria in terms of working towards accreditation or whatever their criteria may be. Payment check, what are their terms, their conditions, and how do they pay you and when do they pay you? And of course, you may be called on at short notice and you may have to revisit your contract. There's a handout for this that Rory has put together, so you can download that and have it on hand if you're thinking of going with an EAP, or if you are working with an EAP, just to refresh yourself and relook at that. And you can get that by going to counsellingtutor.com. That's our website. Click on the podcast tab, go to episode 293. That's today's episode, right there in the show notes. Free download on the EAP Employment Assistant Program work, the pros and the cons. And I did promise at the head of this that we might look at how can you kind of hone your skill set to be more desirable to an EAP provider. So if you think of an EAP provider, they are a central hub. They're having referrals into them, maybe from many, many different companies, and then they are kind of trying to target those out to specific counselors and therapists. Chances are they already have counselors and psychotherapists on their books. So how do you kind of show yourself, rise to the top? And one way of doing that is being clear about your special areas of work. So have you done any CPD or any course that gives you additional skills that might open a specific presentation set? So we call this a niche, niching down and being a specialist in a certain area. And an example of that, when I was working with EAPs, my training was part of my training was in recovery services. So I had the training and the ability to work with alcohol and drug dependents and families of alcohol and drug dependents, and I made sure that that was made clear when I was approaching EAPs, and that was 80% of the work that I was given, because they were looking, when that kind of presentation came in, they were looking through their list, looking for who has that competence. They would see my name and I would get the referrals through from them. They paid me slightly more for those specialist presentations as well. I don't know if that's still the case. I'm not in practice anymore, so I can't speak from today's practice, but certainly have a look. And I guess, Rory, as we kind of back out of this topic, how might somebody listening to this go, if someone's saying, you know what, I think I might like to work for an employment assistance program, where might someone look to try and find one to say, I want to join your EAP, Rory?
Well, yes, thank you for asking this. And that's a question I asked myself when I came to set this topic. So what I did is I just typed in employment assistant programs into my favorite search engine, and UK, because obviously I'm based in the UK, and it brought up just a number of employment assistance programs. And because of the wonders of modern search engines, knowing where you are, it brought these organisations up that were in my geographical area. Yeah. So it was within about 20 miles, and you could just reach out to them, just have a look, see what their intake process is. You might have to send in a CV, or you might have to send in copies of your qualifications and the type of work you do. You almost certainly have to have some kind of one-to-one meeting. I had my one-to-one meeting over the phone many years ago, and they put you on the bank, and then what happens is you get a phone call or an email, can you see someone, and the ball is rolling. But if you're looking and you're interested in EAP work, just type in EAP. I'm trying not desperately not to say Google, because other search engines are available.
Bing.
But Bing. Yeah, Bing it. But pop it into your search engine and you'll be able to find them, and just reach out and, and also speak to your wider network. Yep. Almost certainly your network, your supervisor will have experience of who to work for, who are the good ones and who are the ones that maybe you want to maybe swerve past.
Yeah. And the first key that opens that door, as you quite rightly said, Rory, is you're going to be sending some form of CV through. And it's there that you get to outline your specialisms. And very important this day and age is holding a qualification in online working and telephone working. Yeah. That will stand you in good stead. It just opens work straight away. It just opens a doorway to work that others maybe without that would not be able to get. They would only be able to do in face-to-face in the rooms. If you are looking to train in online and telephone counselling, Counselling Tutor have offered a training course on this. It's a certificate training course. We've offered it for some time now, since 2020. Over 10,000 therapists have made their way through that training course. We've made it affordable. And to get more information on that, just go to counsellingtutor.com. Right there on the homepage, you'll see our online and telephone certificate training course. But that is it. That is our ethical, sustainable practice for today. Great topic, Rory. Thank you very much for bringing that in. Don't forget to get your handout, Counselling Tutor Podcast tab, episode 293. Go and get Rory's super duper handout working for an EAP, the pros and the cons. And as we move out, I don't know what that was. And as we move out, a variance in tone of voice, I guess, as we move out of ethical, sustainable practice, we go into now Practice Matters. This is the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And today, really interesting. So CPD doesn't just mean studying about presentations and how clients will show up. And CPD is also about how we run our practice and the paperwork we do in our practice, and of course the bookkeeping and how we keep our numbers in our practice and work to the laws of the land and pay our tax within our practice. And Rory, you spoke to our accountant, Kassim, on the topic of why an accountant might be useful and at what stage an accountant might be useful to a counsellor or a psychotherapist.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I did a little bit of a poll in our Facebook group recently. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, then just type in Counselling Tutor into Facebook and you'll find us and pop in and you can see all the questions that are asked. And you can ask a question yourself. And one of the questions that came up was about accounting. There was a number of questions. So I asked the people in the Facebook page, what questions would you want to ask an accountant? And they gave me a little list. And I put them to Kassim, who is our accountant. So it's with great interest that Kassim Harunani answers the question, really, why hire an accountant? And this is what he had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
One of the questions that I get asked a lot, both professionally when I meet colleagues face to face and certainly discussed in our Facebook group, is why I have an accountant. So I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined actually by my accountant, Kassim Harunani, who is going to answer questions put into the Facebook group by you, the Facebook group members, the people in our Facebook group, and just speaking a little bit about the benefits of having an accountant. So first of all, Kassim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess the first question is, if someone's starting up maybe in self-employment for the first time, they've never done it before, what are the benefits of having an accountant?
I think the first thing is that an accountant is experienced, is qualified enough to do the returns for you, whereas yourself, you haven't done this before. You want to start up in your business. You want someone to take that headache away from you. Hence, you can concentrate on your business, grow your business. And your accountant is, he's been doing this. That's his profession. Just like going to a doctor, you go to an accountant. He'll be able to, do your tax return for you more professionally, and he'll be able to know exactly what figures, what amount, income amounts, what expenses you'll be eligible to claim. Whereas you might not have that knowledge. He'll be able to, claim the expenses that can be claimed, and probably not take those expenses that may not be able to be claimed. You may not have that knowledge, and which effectively, if you were to claim amounts that are not claimable, put you in trouble with HMRC. So hence he's able to take that, use his professional expertise and do your tax returns for you, to take that headache away from you. So all you got to do is providing the income and expenses that you think you've been incurring in the business, and he'll be able to do the rest for you.
Yeah, so the first thing here is it's horses for courses, as we'd say. You don't do psychotherapy, and I don't do accounting, and that's the way of the world. And I have to say that one of the things I've observed is that the first thing is that, of course, the paying tax if you're self-employed, it's a legal requirement. So you need to make sure that you're within the law. and I think people forget that sometimes. I think it's easily forgotten. On other businesses, I've seen people who have, shall we say, been very creative with their tax and found themselves in a lot of difficulty, Kassim.
Absolutely. We get that all the time, and that's what I advise my clients. Sometimes, they try to do things and they come up with, we think that this, we can do this. Our friends have told us this. It's important to speak to your accountant. He has the specialist knowledge. He'll be able to advise you what's right, what's wrong. It's no point doing something which is not right and then getting into trouble with HMRC. We see this all the time, and then we need to we get to we then have to rectify all their mistakes. But you've already started off on the wrong step with HMRC, and you don't want that, because once you do that, you're always there in their records, as in they can pick you up, ask questions later on, make inquiries later on as well.
Yeah, so start as you mean to go on, pay your taxes. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said there's only two certainties in life: death and taxes. And we have to pay our taxes. Now, we've had a few questions in the Facebook page. We had a lot of them, and I've tried to, because of the time we have together, just limit them down. So one was somebody who asked about mileage claims. So a lot of therapists may go to different locations in the purpose of their work. They might go to 3 or 4 schools or 3 or 4 different places. So when we're looking at mileage, what counts as your main place of work? That was the question.
Well, the thing is, as I said, the mileage, it needs to be performed while carrying out, performing your duties. You see, when you're going to a permanent place of work, from home to a permanent place of work, that's not allowed. You can't claim mileage on that. However, and that's deemed as ordinary commuting. So what they do is they try to differentiate. HMRC try to differentiate ordinary commuting, where, as opposed to commuting, where you're supposed to do you go to you're sent by a job to do the work, and that's called temporary commuting. If it's temporary commuting, that's allowed. Now, what's deemed as temporary commuting? Now, it's difficult when you're going to make permanent place of work. Obviously that comes under ordinary commuting. But if you're going to a place where you're going to be there for a short term, how do they deem short term? HMRC give a guideline of about 24 months. If it's under 24 months, you went there for short time, that you could claim that. However, what's important, which HMRC look at, is that you need to be spending less than 40% of your working time at any one place. So if you're working, you're working for more than 40% of your work time at one place, you won't be able to claim that as mileage. Yeah.
Right.
So that's how you base your whether that's place of work or temporary place of work.
Yes. I do remember a conversation we had where I was going to a meeting, and I said, "Can I use my company credit card to fill my petrol tank up?" And he went, "No, Rory, that's not how it works." and yes, so it sounds to me like it could be tricky to claim commuting. Certainly, if you've got one main area of work, you can't claim it for that. And right. You'd have to claim 40%. You'd have to be going other places 40% of the time to claim it, and it would have to be over a period of 24 months.
24 months. Yeah. They look at less than 24 months where you are for less. If it's more than 24 months, that's deemed as a permanent place of work. And number 2, then they look at how much of your working time is spent at that workplace, because you could have 2 to 3 jobs. You see, so if it's less than 40% of your working time, then yes, that's fine. If you're going to a permanent place of work, and from there you're supposed to go see clients or go for a meeting, that's fine. You can allow you can claim that as mileage allowance.
Okay. So, I think that clears that up. The next question we've got is: are you required to have a separate bank account to receive payments? So, if somebody has a therapy business, can the money be put into their own account, or would it be best to go into a separate bank account?
Now, the thing is, if he's trading as a sole trader, there's no legal requirement to have a separate bank account. account. As far as the law is concerned, there's no legal requirement if you're a sole trader. However, it's always good to have a separate bank account for your business. Number one, it gives it credibility. Number two, it's easier to administer that account, your accounts, for your accountant to prepare the accounts, do your tax returns for you. And sometimes banks as well, they wouldn't like you to use your personal account. They'll deter you from using your personal account. They want a business account, and if it's a limited company, you're supposed to have a separate a bank account for your limited company. Whereas for sole trader, it's not legally required, but it's suggested and it's advised, strongly advised that you have a separate bank account. Also, if you want to look into get a loan or something, the banks, it's important that you have a separate account. That's what banks look at. We've had this all the time where people use their own personal accounts, and we have problems with the banks, and then they're not very happy with you using the personal accounts, and they're unable to get loans as well. So credibility is important to have a separate bank account for credibility.
Yes. So in terms of excuse me, I was counting again. In 5, 4, 3. So in terms of bank accounts, it's probably best to have a separate bank account so that you can claim if you ever want credit from the bank, it would be seen against your business. And also it makes life a little easier. For the accountant can just look at only one picture, and that is your money in and your money out from your business. Now, you do bring up an interesting point between being a sole trader and being a limited company. What kind of decision does someone have to make to think, I think I should be limited? What would be the threshold where someone thought, I'd probably be better off being a limited company?
Well, it just depends now. There are sort of different tax aspects for how a sole trader is taxed and how a limited company is taxed. Now, if you think that if your objective is to grow the business and you think that you're going to be growing quickly, and it's important that you start off the right way, the right structure. As I mentioned, sole traders are taxed directly on their profits. Now if your profits are under the basic rate threshold, which is £50,270, then you tax at 20% directly, and anything over and above that would be taxed at 40%. And then you go to be paying national insurance as well, class 4 national insurance. Whereas under a limited company, you being a director of the limited company, the limited company is taxed at 19% as long as your profits are under £50,000, and then the tax goes up, and that is from this year onwards. The corporation tax goes up to 25%, but that is for profits over £250,000, and there's tapering relief for profits between £50,000 and £250,000. So it just depends. If your profits are going to be quite high, it might be important to start off as a limited company, whereas there are lots of ways to say the expenses that you can claim under a limited company. You can which probably you can't under a sole trader. So if you're looking to grow the business, and a limited company is always more trustworthy. It's seen as a trustworthy. The records are available. Banks would like to deal. They deal better with limited companies as well, as opposed to sole traders. So it just depends, your business, how much you're going to be growing. If you're going to think you're going to be growing, how much profits you'll be making, and you can make your decisions accordingly.
Yeah, and I think you make a very, very good point. We're recording this we're recording it in the January of 2024, and we know that taxation and finances are moving feast. So when we get to April, we'll have another budget, certainly here in the UK, and then the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who is the person who sets the tax rates, will tell us if things are the same or things are different. So the information we give you today may alter or be modified as we move through the year. So I think that's really useful. And I think in terms of sole trader or limited company, I think it's a conversation to have with an accountant, because I think it's one of those situations where you'd have to kind of lay out your business plan. And one of the things you're probably going to ask is, where do you see yourself in 2, 3 or 4 years?
Very true.
Yeah. And actually, you can actually be a sole trader and a limited company. I'm a sole trader. and I'm a director of 2 limited companies.
Yes.
And
yes.
you know, you can do that for my counselling business, because it's a very low income, because I you know, it's not something I grew. I'm a sole trader, but for the 2 other businesses that I run, I'm a limited company. Now, another question that came along is accounting for cash. Do you have to do anything different for accounting to cash, or do you just show it in your bank account when you pay it in?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, if it's cash, you know, you got to. It's important to declare everything. Cash is, you know, cash-intensive businesses are risky. And HMRC normally do target those companies or businesses that are cash intensive. So it's important to have proper records. You know, for all the cash that you receive, you pay out, please make sure that you keep all your receipts, your invoices to back that up. Everything that you receive should be banked, and anything you pay out as well should try to you know, make sure that you make the payment through your bank. Not to hold cash. Because, you know, it's number one, risky to hold cash, but number 2, it's not seen to be, you seem to be, you know, it may give the wrong idea that you're hiding something, you know, holding cash in the business. So it's important to bank what cash you have, yeah, and to make sure you keep all the receipts, invoices, you know, to back that up.
Yeah, and I have to say is that I'm sure that HMRC have a very good idea what the average income of a counsellor would be, and you know, I've got someone I know who works at HMRC. His Manchester's Revenue and Customs, I think is the term, and they have models. They'd have a good idea how much a counsellor would earn. Now, one of the other questions is, when does a self-employed person's financial year start?
Well, there are 2 different things here. One is a tax year for individuals, which runs from 6th of April in 1 year, ends on 5th of April the following year. That's a tax year, financial tax year, and that's how we prepare our tax returns. Now, you could have as a sole trader, you could have your year end as anything, 30th of June, you know, 31st of December. However, you know, from now onwards, HMRC would require us to declare the income, the profits from your sole trader business based on the tax year. So even if your sole trader business is you know, and your end is 30th of June, you're preparing your books from 1st of July to 30th of June, you've got to make sure you extract the profits that relate to the tax year. So it's important now, especially with making tax digital, which is coming into play from 2016 onwards. It has been postponed for the last 2-3 years. HMRC keeps on postponing it. It's important. All the tax will be declared. All the returns will be done based on the year ends being the tax year, based on the tax year, which is 5th of April. So if your year end is 31st of March to 5th of April, you're fine. That's how you declare your taxes. But if you're using a different year, which you can at the moment, you'll have to use the tax year to declare your income, your profits.
Yeah. So I mean, if you started your business at, I don't know, November the 5th, there's a topical time, isn't it? 5th of
Yes.
November. Your personal tax year, or your personal tax year run 5th of November to 1 year to the 5th of November the other. That'll be your entire year, and you'll be able to see how much you earned between those two dates. However, you would be declaring your tax between the 5th of November in 1 year and the April of the next year. Am I right?
Absolutely, because that's when, that's in the first year. That's your first year. Yeah. The following year, you need to look at 2 years of your financial. You look at your 2 financial years and extract your profits from April to April.
Yes. Yeah, and that's basically what you do. And I have to say that I've been self-employed now, I think, for about 6 or 7 years now, and I would have never have got. I would have fallen up the first hurdle had I not had an accountant. So I don't want to, I don't want to influence people. I fear I will do, but having a professional you can go to and say, look, here it is. Give me great help. It's fantastic. Now, One of the other questions that people ask is that a lot of people would graduate, say, in August of 1 year, and then become self-employed. Could they claim their training, the money they paid for their training, maybe in the September of the previous year, as a tax relief?
No, that's a very good question, actually. We get that asked all the time, and HMRC is very, very strict on this, and they lay down the rules very clearly as far as training and courses are concerned. Most of the training and courses people do are to benefit. It's for their own benefit or benefit their own knowledge. And the business or the profession they are in doesn't require them to do that. For example, if your work requires you to or your profession requires you to undertake some CPD courses, without which you'll not be able to perform your duties properly, or you'll not be able to continue the profession. It is a requirement. That is deemed as an allowable. That's an allowable. You can claim that against in your taxes. However, if you're you performing, you just want to do an additional course just to benefit yourself. It doesn't actually. There's no requirement by your workplace or your profession. Then that's not claimable.
Yeah. So if I was a counsellor and I decided, I'd love to do a bricklaying course. Yeah, and I'll learn how to be a plumber. And I went to my local college and I paid for that, and I tried to claim it against my tax. I could find myself in some difficulty.
Absolutely. Even if if you become a plumber and you're working as a plumber, because you are that was used for your personal benefit to become a plumber. So you wouldn't be able to, unless you become a plumber and there's certain new techniques that have come out that require your job the job requires you to learn those techniques. Yeah. And yes, that's fine. You can claim
so that. I think it'd be safe to say that if someone's a therapist and they're studying any kind of continual professional development around being a therapist, I recently did a course on group therapy, and I would have claimed that against my company because that would enhance my skill set as a therapist.
Yes, that's right. It's important that you're able to perform your duties in a more better way. You'll be able to provide better service to your customers, to your clients.
Yes. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Kassim, for being so gracious to share what is very important professional knowledge with our audience. And also, I think what I've got from this, if I didn't know this already, was you're probably better off getting an accountant. Now, in terms of reaching out to an accountant, is there anything that someone should look for? I noticed that you've got ACA and FCCA in your title.
Sure. Now, these are the two main accounting bodies in the UK. One is the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Yeah, that's the ACA you see next to my name. So I'm a professional chartered accountant. I'm a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. So one is chartered accountant, being a member of a chartered accountant, and the other one, the FCCA, that's certified. That's the other main professional body in the UK. That's Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. So I'm a chartered accountant, a member of chartered accountant, and certified accountants as well. So I hold both the qualifications as far as accountants is concerned in the UK.
Yeah, so I mean that would be a quality mark to look out for. And just Absolutely. As a matter of interest, is an accountant a protected title? Could I set up as an accountant? Could I have a business card and say Rory the accountant?
Well, you can call yourself what you want these days. Yeah, but the thing is, you wouldn't be able to sort of be part of a registered institute, registered body, accounting body. So you can't say that you are a member. What people should look for is in an accountant that he belongs to a professional body. That's very, very important. Now, that's the qualification. Just like, for example, a lawyer or a doctor, they have the right qualifications. We accountants, once we complete our exams and our training, we are entitled to then use those initials. That's what you need to look for. Either he's a member of the chartered accounting body or the certified accounting body. These are the two main accounting bodies. Very important. Anyone can open office and call himself an accountant or anything, but he's not professional, and there's a high risk if something goes wrong. He doesn't have the right cover as well. He's not protected. So it's important to use the right professionals.
Well, it's quite interesting. I think the counselling and accounting finds themselves in the same position. Anyone can call themselves a counsellor.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really interesting ending to our conversation. Find yourself someone who's qualified and make sure that you're happy with that person's qualifications. I just want to say, Kassim, thank you so much for joining us. I found this really, really interesting. And I can say for certainty that I won't be becoming an accountant very, very anytime very soon.
If you need any help, you know where to come. You know where to call.
Kassim Harunani, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you to Kassim. Thank you to you, Rory, for holding that all-important discussion and for posing those questions. And remember, these are your questions, our listeners from the Facebook that have been posed there. So hopefully you've got some answers out of there. And if maybe you left hanging, you have a question that has not been answered, then get into Facebook and join the community, Counselling Tutor, and go and ask there, because we've got tens of thousands of other counsellors, psychotherapists, supervisors, tutors, and they'll be happy to help you out and get involved in that discussion. So that is Practice Matters. Thank you. And we move out of Practice Matters into Student Services. This is where we recognise you, the student studying formal studies to become a counsellor or a psychotherapist. And we recognise that journey that you're on. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counsellingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your counselling tutor discount. That's counsellingskillsacademy.com. Rory and I tutored together along that journey. We know the highs, we know the lows, we know it's not always easy, we know it can be incredibly rewarding, but there is one area where there is a potential for much growth, but it can be pretty painful when you hit it, and it's receiving negative feedback, Rory.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to go back a few years to the first time I learned to ride a bike. I decided not to have a bike with stabilizers on. I was quite adamant about that, and I went to the park with my father, and I got on the bike and cycled. And within about 2 or 3 meters, I found myself face down in the ground eating grass. And the reason for that was it wasn't because I was no good at being a cyclist. It was because I hadn't learned how to cycle, and that's why I fell off. And I think that sometimes when we are studying, and certainly maybe if we're second chances like myself and Ken, second chances, we didn't go through school particularly in an academic way, sometimes some of the feedback can be harsh. It's a bit like eating that grass in the park when you fall over. And sometimes what we have to do is build resilience and a bit of a thinking strategy around what the feedback is, how we receive it, and how we might work with that. Because I'm a great believer in any feedback is useful, as long as you've got the skill to be able to kind of dissect what's being said and build it in to the way you go go forward. And I'm really pleased to say that I can still ride a bike now. Not very well. I still can. I still can ride a bike now, although a little bit more wobbly. But it goes to prove that you need to practice. But I think the first thing is that we're all stretched out kids. You and me know, Ken, that when we used to teach, you used to get very competent people come into the classroom, and they're just sitting in the classroom for a lot of adults can bring up real fears and real anxiety from the past. We call that transference, the idea that the past infects and affects our here and now. And it's sometimes that when we hear the word negative feedback, may not be that negative. It may be feedback that we're just not in the mindset to handle.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. And it's interesting. We purposely used the word negative feedback here, but the word negative is only in the frame of reference of the observer who is receiving that feedback. Another word that could be used is perhaps constructive feedback. And it depends on how we see it. And I think this is the main lesson here, is how are you with feedback, with constructive feedback? What happens in you when you hear that? What are the feelings? What are the emotions that play out? Because there's where the work is. And of course, there's also work perhaps around what was fed back on that you might need to focus on or redo. It may have been an assignment and you may have had an area referred on that. And that's one part of it in looking at that, understanding what that is, learning from that is, and then taking the next step to make that different as you go forward. But much more important is what plays out within you. How do you react? What do your emotions do? What is being protected in there? I love how you say we're all stretched out kids, Rory. And I remember during my studies and even into my early practice as a counsellor, there was this massive expectation that I had on myself to get it right all the time, because the stakes are so high. We are helping individuals who are bringing their sorrow, their pain, their journey to us. It's an incredibly privileged position, and that is true. However, what was not true, or was just based in my frame of reference, was the level of expectation I put on myself to not get anything wrong. Had to get it right because the stakes are so high. So therefore, when I got maybe negative feedback from a peer in a skill session, it was devastating because within myself, I was letting down all of these future clients. I cannot be a counsellor. I'm not doing it properly. And of course, all of that was just stuff that was happening in me, Rory.
Absolutely. And let's not kind of hide away from the fact that sometimes, some tutors, some peers may not be the most sensitive in giving feedback. And I think that brings another kind of mindset adaptation in that, people's opinions are just opinions. They're like ears. Everybody has them.
Yeah.
And it's what you take away from that. And I'm a great believer in if someone gives me some feedback, is to take the feedback. The emotions sometimes are very, very tough with that. Because as Ken said, it's failure, it's getting it wrong, it's thinking you've got it right, and then all of a sudden falling off your bike again. Taking the emotion out of it, and then coming back and saying, okay, what are the facts about this feedback, and working with the facts. It's a little counterintuitive if you're training as a counsellor and you're working with a lot of feelings. But the best exercise I ever did was I did a CBT exercise in class about being academic that I chose about how I can be academic. And I came to the conclusion that no one's born academic. And that's all I have to do. All I really had to do is do what everybody else who was academic did. And that was just go through the process of understanding what was necessary, understanding how to present it, and understanding how to get the information and put it on the piece of paper. It was like riding my bike. And yeah, I fell off a few times. But what was interesting was that I fell off a lot during my diploma training. And then when I came to train as a teacher, I didn't fall off at all. I'd learned to ride the bike. I'd not got any innate expertise in bike riding. I just learned how to ride it. And it's the same with your assignments. you develop it. And some people, your peers you're sitting next to, may very well have that skill set. You may be sitting next to someone who can ride a bike. And that can be quite frustrating. How's your assignment? I've got it back. How's yours? I've got it referred again. And that can give you those negative feelings. You can absorb those negative feelings of I'm not good enough. Well, the answer is you are. All you have to do is understand the kind of technique, rather like riding a bike. There'd be lots of people after listening to this podcast thinking of bicycles when they get their assignments back.
Yeah. And with you speaking about that, not all feedback is equal. It really isn't.
Yeah.
So it's really tricky to take the emotions out of it. But if we could, let's wave a magic wand and pretend just for a moment that we could completely remove any form of emotion when receiving feedback. The process would then remain, look where the feedback is coming from and ask yourself, is this person qualified, or are they in a position where they are knowledgeable enough to give feedback, or is it just an opinion? Is it constructive feedback for your growth and development, or is it a criticism? Because there is a difference between criticism and constructive feedback. If you are getting feedback from a tutor, it will, if the tutor has been trained and working effectively, you will be getting constructive feedback. You will be told, this fell short of, I'm going to take an assignment, this answer fell short of the criteria. The criteria was asking this, you wrote this. What they were really looking for is this. That is constructive feedback. This is saying, this didn't hit muster. This is what you need to do to get past that. That is constructive. What is not constructive, if someone, I don't know, I'm just taking a complete random idea here. Oh, I don't think you did very well in that simulated skills session. Well, that's not helpful at all. I don't think you were very empathic in that skills session. That is not helpful at all. Why? What? And who is the person saying it? So weigh up, who is this information coming from? Then you get to take that information and you get to make a decision on it. And the decision is, do I take this information and make it part of me and make a change based on this information that I now have? Or do I get this information and say, okay, yes, I see that, and I see your reason for giving this. Thank you. I really appreciate that. But no, I'm going to put that aside. And that is part of professional development. Part of professional development that we would see as supervisors with our supervisees.
Yeah.
When a supervisor is working with you within a certain presentation or something within your practice, they may make comments and suggestions and kind of help to guide. We're not always going to take it on. In fact, when we're kind of writing reports, and if you're writing your final assignment, part of that assignment will be, what information or feedback did you get within your supervision? What did you take on, and what difference did that make? And what did you decide not to take on? And why? Because you are an informed practitioner. That's what's happening here. You're developing your practice, and part of that is going to be about dealing with that feedback. Now, that's only with the magic wand where I've taken all of the emotion out of it. Now, there's no secret, if you're a regular listener to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, that I am neurodivergent. I'm autistic. And I also struggle with something called RSD, which is rejection sensitivity disorder. And it shows itself quite a lot in neurodivergence RSD, rejection sensitivity disorder. And it's almost as if it's a very heavy reaction to negative feedback, to such an extent that I can get negative feedback. Even today, I could get some negative feedback and it can kind of close my day off. That's it. It makes it almost difficult for me to function. Now, I used to think that I took things too much to heart, but I now understand I'm neurodivergent. Now that I have my diagnosis, I understand about RSD, and I'm able to be kinder to myself. So if you do find that your emotions kind of jump to 100 miles an hour in getting challenging feedback, be kind on yourself. be kind and patient with yourself. Deal with the emotion first. And when the emotion is dissipated, then you're more clearly able to see the feedback that has been offered towards you.
Yes, and I'd also say try and develop that kind of thinking strategy rather than, yes, certainly be thoughtful to yourself and don't beat yourself up. But, remember that you are learning, and with learning, there's no such thing as fail. It's first attempts in learning, isn't it? Fail. First attempt in learning. It's as easy as that. You're going to fall off the bike. I'm going to milk this metaphor for all it's worth. You're going to fall off the bike more than often. And here's the thing. I was very, very keen mountain biker when I was younger, and I'd learned to ride a bike, and I was very competent at it. And I can tell you, even as a competent mountain biker, I fell off. And that means that, even people who seem really competent at doing things, maybe your peer, maybe you look at your tutor and think, I'll never aspire to be like tutor. Trust me, they will have things referred. I recently wrote a chapter for a book, and I sent it in, and the sub-editor sent it back with lots of critique, shall we say, that I had to rewrite. And I just shrugged my shoulders and went, oh, fair enough, that's what they want, and I'll pop that in, and it's been published now. But you never, even when you become competent, there's always times when you will get feedback. But as Ken said, feedback should be constructive. It should be developmental. So it's no good saying, well, those skills were rubbish. Someone should say to you, have you thought of trying this? Have you thought of trying that? And I think when I know when Ken gives feedback, we say, yeah, okay, I can see what you've done here. I wonder if you tried this or you tried that. And then let's see you again when we were observing. Let's see you putting that in. And then we would make a note, and then we'd come back. And usually, 9 times out of 10, students would come along and they'd take our observations, build it in, and they would develop their skills or develop their writing skills. And off we go. But it can be tough. But just remember, when you go into that classroom, it's not school anymore. Really handle the transference. I think the transference is the biggest thing. How many people go into classrooms, they're catapulted back.
7 again.
Yeah. 7 again. 7 again.
Getting it wrong again in class.
There's the teacher, and I've had students in tears. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like school. I said, no, it's not like school. And I've been quite, quite direct. I said, look, this isn't school. I get it, you've had a tough time at school, but this isn't school. And you're 40. You're not that person anymore. I get there's residual feelings, but, this is the here and the now. And I think it's set me in good stead, to be honest, Ken. And I think it's a useful skill to have to build into yourself.
Yeah, it's resilience at the end of the day. That's what we're speaking about. And I'm going to share a little journaling technique that helps build resilience. And it's at the end of each day to journal about what did I think, what did I say, what did I do? And it's just those 3 questions. What did I think today? What did I say? What did I do? So it's thoughts, action, or words, actions. And if there's anything that I look at and I go, perhaps I could have handled that differently. It's a form of self-critique. It's challenging self on a daily basis. And challenging self on a daily basis, there's a gentleness with self-challenge. There's no need to feel, I said that, now, and the emotions. There can be a gentleness and a kindness and an acceptance with that. But it is just a way of building resilience, because each and every day you're kind of going through a process of looking at self honestly and looking at how can I better? What did I think? What did I say? And what did I do? How did I act today? Is there anything I can learn from that and anything that I can do differently? So often, when you're getting feedback, it is given from a place of love, a place of wanting for you to grow, learn, and flourish. That is the motivation that it is given with. It's interesting that sometimes we can receive it with a heaviness and with a pain, and that is about again, self-exploration. But as we go out of this topic in student services, here's maybe a thought for you. Yes, you're going to receive lots of feedback during your counselling studies, but you're probably going to be giving some feedback as well. You might be speaking to another peer about how you found their skills session, or you might be speaking to a peer about something that came up within a personal development group. So you are going to be giving feedback as well. So think about how you can give feedback from that place of kindness, where it does come across as non-threatening, where it is from a position of love and wanting the best for the other person. And I think that will stand you in good stead.
Here, Ken. I couldn't agree more. And and also I think that if you're getting feedback that doesn't come from a place of love or a place of wanting the best for you, then smile politely and move on.
Yeah.
Because if that's what I do. Oh, that's what I do. I go, yeah, well, right, yeah, wow, great, thanks. I'll make a note of that, and then I'll just get off. Because if someone isn't willing to put in feedback that helps you develop, then really it's not feedback.
Yeah.
Simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, criticism.
It's not feedback.
Well, there you have it. That is our student services. Hopefully you will get something from that, because without a doubt, you're going to face that lots of feedback and give some feedback during your studies. Rory and I are so grateful that you joined us today to listen to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This has been episode 293.
Yes, we started off with ethical, sustainable practice, and we talked about working for an employment assistant program, sometimes referred to as an EAP, the pros and the cons, and of course there's a super handout for that waiting for you on the Counselling Tutor website, episode 293 in the podcast tab. We moved on to Practice Matters, interview with Kassim Harunani. Why hire an accountant? And he answered lots of frequently asked questions in our Facebook group. And then finally, we moved on to student services, and we talked to how to handle negative feedback and assignment referrals. And, before we close today's episode, do us a bit of a favour. If you've enjoyed Ken and myself's chat, then why not leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're tuning in for. A lot of people tune in from iTunes, so nip over there and give us a 5-star review. It really cheers our day up. And if you know someone who might benefit from Ken and myself's conversation, the topics we shared, why don't you pass it on? Either put it on your social media and share it with your peers, or email the link to someone. And finally, we really do appreciate you being part. We do appreciate being part of your journey. We know how important the journey of counselling is, be a qualified colleague or a student colleague. So thank you for allowing us on that journey. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.